Morning, I'm Ryan with Fielding Tree Care. I'm one of our certified arborists on staff, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Bur Oak, which we have next to me. Bur Oaks are really good urban tree species because they thrive in a variety of soil types. Um, we can start maybe with the ID characteristics for this tree. So the bark, as it ages, kind of gets these shallow furrows and more of a flaky plated bark. I usually call it an ashen gray color. Really pretty bark characteristic. As far as the branching habit, we have alternately spaced leaves, and I've got a sample for you can look at. So there are two main categories of branch and leaf arrangement on stems. Three if you're counting whorled leaves, but this tree species has alternate leaves, so they alternate along the stem. A little hard to tell in this short branch section, but comparatively, we can think about oppositely spaced leaves, which would be directly across from one another. So this is an alternate arrangement on the stem. As far as the leaf itself goes, we have these broad kind of club-shaped leaves for Bur Oaks. The thing that really helps me ID them quickly is that typically they have one really deep sinus per leaf. Sometimes they have a couple, but this sinus is basically this empty space between these leaf lobes. And then the leaf shape overall is kind of like that club shape that I mentioned. Generally, the leaf margin is smooth. So it's a smooth leaf margin, nice kind of deep green color. These leaves are looking a little bit rough because there's actually a couple of different pathogen issues going on. As far as the twigs go, typically they're kind of smooth. On some species, this is probably a cultivated variety of an oak, a Bur Oak. So the young twigs are pretty smooth. Sometimes they get corky ridges on the bark as they age. But what we're seeing here is actually one of those pathogens that I mentioned. So this is a gall that's formed by the bullet gall wasp, which is a wasp that basically lays its eggs in little kind of slits in the bark, little cracks, little crevices, and then the larvae develop in these kind of woody galls, and then they emerge, the following year. They have a little bit more of a complex life cycle that I won't get into the specifics of, but typically they're not an issue for oaks. They can handle pretty high populations without really experiencing any ill effects. The water and nutrient transport systems are very, very mildly affected by these galls, but overall it's not a major impact to their health. So this is something that's pretty common on urban oaks that you might see. Some individuals are a little bit resistant. This cultivar, again, or cultivated variety, not that resistant. It's pretty plentiful throughout the whole tree. In the area that I'm in, there are several other oaks where there's no galls to be found. So they're actually, there's varying levels of resistance in urban populations, which is interesting. So that's one of the main issues you'll see with these oaks. Another thing you might see is oak leaf blister, which is a fungal pathogen that can kind of cause these brown deformed leaves. You can see that it develops on the tips. Sometimes it starts in kind of the interior section of the leaf as well. But another just kind of mild pathogen. Generally, oaks can handle a high amount of leaf damage from this particular fungus. There are sprays that you can use preventatively in the spring to kind of prevent that from happening, but truthfully, it's really just a cosmetic thing, kind of like the oak galls here, the bullet gall wasp. So one of the additional considerations when we think about treating for this bullet gall wasp is the fact that there might be other insects that are attracted to the galls themselves. So when the galls are growing, it can actually create a little bit of a sugary substance which attracts wasps and other insects that might feed on that, which can be a real nuisance. We never recommend treating for the other insects because generally they're yellow jackets or wasps, like I had mentioned, that fly in from elsewhere. So treating the things that are existing on the tree, those wasps that visit the tree, is really difficult because they're highly mobile. They can come in from elsewhere. Um, and treatment of the bullet gall wasp itself is pretty difficult, but there are a variety of ways that we can kind of reduce the population such that those secondary insects, those kind of flying, buzzing insects that no one likes around, especially if you have an oak tree in your backyard and maybe it's next to where you eat dinner in the summer or something. You don't want those things flying around too much. So um, that's another consideration when we think about treating for the bullet gall wasp specifically, for those secondary pests that might be attracted to the situation. One thing to consider when we think about pest issues is it occurring year over year at really high pressure levels? And that is usually used as a threshold for treatment. So if we see that there's really severe oak leaf blister for several consecutive years, that's when it can start to affect the health of the tree. The same generally can be said about the bullet gall wasp. If there's a really intense high population of these wasps, and there's not enough natural predators around to control the population, then it can start to be, it can start to affect the health of the tree, which is, again, that's kind of our threshold for when we want to treat for these issues that on their own aren't huge factors in the health of the tree, but perhaps, consecutive years of really bad infestations or leaf damage, that can impact the health. As far as the habit goes, which is kind of the overall form of this tree, oaks are really notorious for having these lower kind of sprawling branches. Really open grown trees have these beautiful branch structure. We often think that they're the kind of poster child of good structure when they're in urban environments, because you have all the branches are kind of contained naturally within their uh, designated third of the canopy. In their native environment, they're actually fire adapted species. So I come from the Midwest originally, and we have oak savannas out there with these big, old, beautiful bur oaks with these long, lower, sprawling branches that kind of just hang out in these mixture of grass and shrubland environments. It's kind of a transitional zone between a more forested environment and a traditional, what we think of as like a tall grass prairie. So oak savannas are really unique environments, but the bur oak is kind of the poster child of that environment. So bur oaks overall are a really great urban tree species. They do well, I think I had mentioned, over a variety of soil types. Um, Not many major pest and disease issues that are significant to the health of the tree. So if you're considering planting a new tree, this is a great species, really underutilized in the urban environment. Well, thank you for watching this video. Please like and follow us on social media. That really helps our exposure. And I hope you have a great day.